Hello again, class. This is chapter 8.3. The lesson is entitled Congruent Polygons. If you'll notice on your paper, it tells us the definition of a congruent polygons is that they are polygons with the same size and shape. If you recall from when we've had congruent polygons in the past, it means that you have matching angles and sides that are called corresponding parts. Notice that when naming congruent polygons, you should always list the corresponding vertices in the same order. In our first diagram here, we have two quadrilaterals, YRTV and KMPL. What we're going to need to do is list our congruencies. And I usually tell students the best way to start is with the angles. Now, if you'll notice, we have tick marks. This is called a tick mark. And this tick mark, since it has the same number of ticks, that means those two sides are congruent. This has 2 ticks. This has 2 ticks. So those two sides are congruent. To mark congruent angles, we use the arcs. They are actually a form of tick marks. So you'll notice that angle T and angle L are congruent, and so are angle Y and angle M. Now, I usually tell students it's a good idea to start with a pair of angles and then to go kind of around the rest of the quadrilateral. So I'm going to go with angle T congruent to angle L. Then I'm going to go to angle R, and that should be congruent to angle K, angle Y, congruent to angle M, and that leaves angle V, congruent to angle P. The fact that you've got angles that are congruent mean that we have sides that are congruent, or line segments that are congruent. So we're going to go with line segment TR congruent to line segment LK. Now, if you'll notice, I match up T and R, L and K. Then I shift and I go down to RY, line segment RY, and then I'll go with line segment KM. And I go to YV, line segment YV is going to be congruent to line segment MP. Now, if you'll note, you've got 4 angles, therefore you've got to have 4 line segment congruencies too. The only 2 that I haven't matched up yet are line segment TV congruent to line segment LP. So then I'm going to take my first and last and put those together. Now, if I go on to state the congruency, then I can go on to state the congruency that a quadrilateral TRYV is congruent to quadrilateral LKMP. Now again, you'll note when I do the naming, T is in the same corresponding position as L, R with K, Y with M, and V with P. Sometimes they are just going to tell me that I have 2 quadrilaterals that are congruent. In this case, they're going to tell me that I've got quadrilateral ABCD congruent to quadrilateral PQRS. Now what they want me to do, according to my sheet, or you to do, is to list the congruencies. Because they are telling you automatically that the polygons are congruent, I can use the same relative positions. A is in the same corresponding position with P. P is in the same position as A, so that's going to be angle P. B is second, so is Q. C is third, so is R. and D is the fourth, and therefore so is S. Now at this point I'd like for you to hit pause and you do the corresponding line segment. Okay, you can check your answers to see if you got the corresponding line segments correct. The second part of the lesson is going to be showing that triangles are congruent. We have exactly 3 ways of showing that triangles are congruent to one another. That is to use side, 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 angle, and angle, side, angle. In this first group of diagrams, I have triangle ABC and triangle IHG. Now, if you'll note, you've got these tick marks. Line segment AB, line segment IH are congruent, line segment BC with line segment HG, and line segment CA with line segment GI. Therefore, I can say that triangle ABC is congruent to triangle. Notice that we do have a symbol for triangle. We don't for quadrilateral. Now here I'm going to have to match it up. Line segment AB matches up to IH. So I has to be in the same similar corresponding position as A, B with H, and then C and G. And I'm going to say that triangle ABC is congruent to triangle IHG by side, side, side. Now this only works, side, 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 only works if you have the 3 pairs of tick marks. If we look at the second pair of triangles, we have triangle ABC, this time we have triangle DEF. Note that I don't have 3 pairs of tick marks. I have 2 pairs of tick marks, and I have a pair of arcs. Now, in this situation, I know that angle A is congruent to angle B. So I can put those in the same relative position. AB, line segment AB, is congruent to line segment DE. So I know that it can go from A to B and D to E. And that leaves me with vertex C and vertex F. And that is true by what we call side, angle, side. Now if you'll note, as your paper says, the congruent sides have to, they are the sides of the congruent angle. They have to make up the congruent angle. If you don't have that, if the tick marks aren't here, for example, they're here instead, that is not a side angle side, because the congruent sides don't make up the congruent angle. This side, line segment EF, does not make up the congruent angle D. So I have to be very careful to watch out for that when I'm using side angle side. Now here I have my last pair. I don't have 3 sets of tick marks. In fact, I don't even have 2 sets of tick marks. What I have here is 2 sets of arcs. And if you'll notice, the tick marks on the side is a ray that is shared between the 2 congruent angles. And that has to be very true. If this tick mark wasn't here, it was over here, I can't say that the 2 triangles are congruent, because the tick marked sides aren't in the same relative position. You have to have the tick marks in between the arcs. So in this particular instance, I know that angle A and angle L are congruent. I know that angle B is congruent to angle M, and that leaves C to be congruent to angle N. And I know that this is true by angle, side, angle. Well, those are the only 3 I have to prove triangles are congruent. 3 sets of tick marks, side, side, side. 2 sets of tick marks and an arc, side, angle, side. 2 sets of arcs, 1 set of tick marks, angle, side, angle. That's it. I don't have anything else. So what if I look at 2 triangles and they ask me, okay, are these 2 triangles congruent? Explain. Remember back in a chapter when we did some proportions with similar triangles, and I said, sometimes it just makes sense to separate out your diagrams, and I would do that here. Here's W, here's X, here's Z. You have a right angle. There's a tick mark here. Notice that XZ is a tick mark. Now XZ is really a part of the two triangles, of both triangles. So I'm going to draw my other X, Y, Z, right angle, tick mark. Now here's where you have to have a leaf. According to geometry, all right angles are congruent. Therefore, I could actually draw an arc here and here. Now, notice what I've got. I've got a pair of sides that are tick marked, a pair of sides that are tick marked. Notice that the angle that's arced, the two sides that have tick marks on them, make up that angle Z. They make up the arced angle. Therefore, I can say that triangle WXZ has to be congruent to triangle. Now, this triangle over here on the right side literally has to flip to lay over top of WXZ. So W has to be corresponding to Y. And X, of course, has to correspond to itself, and then Z corresponds to itself. So I have the two triangles congruent, WXZ and triangle YXZ. So I'm going to say yes, and it is by side, angle, side. Now sometimes when you look at two diagrams, you're going to see it as side, side, side. They'll be the tick marks. Sometimes you will see angle, side, angle. You'll see the arcs and the tick marks. This diagram is a little tougher, so that's why I split it out for you. Okay, now I have a diagram here. They're asking me, are the two triangles congruent? And I would have to say no, because all I have is a side and an angle. So there's not enough information. This does not happen that often. So if you find yourself writing not enough information down for about 5 different diagrams on the worksheet, you need to go back and redo it and look it over again. So this concludes lesson 8.3, and please respond with pairs. Catch you next time.